Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Talk More Talk. It's a solo Beatles video cast. I'm Joe Mayo from the Mean Mr. Mayo channel, and I'm here with my co host. We're ready for a good show tonight where we're going to be talking about our choices for what we feel are most underrated of the solo Beatles albums, one from each of the solo Beatles. And to start with here, helping me out, we always let the ladies go first. And we have here the Sun Queen. I haven't called her that in a long time. And I'm talking about she's an author, among other things, and she teaches classes, all kinds of things. Sign up for her classes and learn something. Okay, she'll give you the She'll give you the information on that. Okay, but she's got some books out there. Among them, got it right here. Songs we were singing, guided tours through the Beatles' lesser known tracks. Also, Fandom and the Beatles, the act you've known for all these years. And I like to give an honorable mention to Michael Jackson, FAQ. I think it's all that's left to know about the King of Pop, I think is the other part. Long titles. Long titles, indeed. Okay, Kit, and welcome as always.
Thank you so much, sir. Hello, everybody, and welcome everybody out there.
All right, and next up, all the way from good old hot Arizona, although over where I am in the New York area, it's been kind of unseasonably warm, and I love it. Telling
It's
you that.
freezing here in Chicago.
Freezing
It's
in
freezing. I have my
Chicago.
sweater on.
Freezing
Shut up.
in Chicago. I got the short sleeves. Yeah. Okay. He's one of the hosts of the Two Legs McCartney podcast that he does with his partner Andy Nichols, and I'm talking about Thomas Hunyadi. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Joe. And it gets so hot. I'm thinking about turning this fan on, but I know everybody gets mad when that fan's on because
Yeah, I know. I've had
distractions.
people tell me, oh, and then when we do our movie
Right.
videos, we do movie discussions. People are like, Tom, get the fan out of there. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I always hate having to put Ken Michaels at the end because he's maybe last but not least. It's like you might say in the out of respect, the grand finale here, so to speak, of announcing people, talking about so many years, as I always like to say, in the biz, talking about the Beatles, doing radio shows, that syndicated every little thing show, which I would like to hear, but every time I turn it on, I'm a little late. I think it's 6 a.m. on the dial where I am, and I always turn it on at 7 a.m. or it's something and I miss it. Well, I'll have to get it. I'll have to get up a little earlier.
Just in time
But
for Ken's. See you next time.
next time. But in addition to that, of course, he has another show that he does, and it's a podcast called Things We Said Today. This is really a good Beatles show. And he also, of course, has a YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, and that's his name, Ken Michaels. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for that long introduction. You never have to wait anymore to hear every little thing because it's on demand. It's on UFDU's website. So it's always great. I always like to push radio stations because I want radio to still survive. And WFDU runs my show Sunday mornings at 6. But if you can't get up that early, they leave it on their website for 2 weeks each show. So yeah, do that.
Seven on Sundays would be perfect for me, but I'll start getting up a little earlier. How's that?
Okay, but
All
listen
right.
on demand. You can listen with
Yeah, it's a free world. Well, country, well, whatever. Okay, everybody. So let's get going. But before we do, let's go back to Ken and find out what is going on in the news, Beatles stuff, and elsewhere. God, I'm tongue tied. I'm sorry.
You're being so formal with Thomas over here, and
Kenneth Michaels, let us know, Kenneth.
yeah, it's been a few weeks since our last show, so some news has accumulated, as you would expect. First of all, I want to make sure it's the number one thing I say. The McCartney Legacy Volume 1 1969 to 73, has been nominated for the 2023 Association for Recorded Sound Collections Awards for Excellence in Historical Recorded Sound Research. Congrats to the two authors of that book, Adrian Sinclair and Alan Kozin of Things We Said Today fame. Also, it was announced a few weeks ago, and this is kind of old now, but hey, we haven't been on the air for what, 3 weeks, I think?
Something like that.
Ringo and his all-star band will be back on the road for a spring tour with dates on the west coast of the US running from May 19th to June 17th. Altogether, 19 dates in total, with Ringo hitting California, including, of course, the Greek Theater. Nevada, he'll be at the Venetian Theater in Las Vegas for 3 shows. Also hitting Arizona. He had to stop there because of Tom. Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and Utah. I know for a fact he made sure that he had a date in Arizona just for Utah.
Well, thank you.
He was wasting his time.
You might be disappointed this time around. But
I don't think Tom's going.
I don't know yet. I'm still deciding. Listen, I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but one change to the lineup to me might not be worth going to see. I don't know. That's right now. I'm not saying I'm not going, but as of right now, we'll see.
And besides, there might be a good ballet that night for you to go to.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if the Romeo and Juliet ballet comes back, I'm definitely going to see that again. Absolutely.
Boy,
There you go.
Ringo will love this show now.
Sorry, guys.
I'll see you again, Ringo, if you come around back into the
They had a
East Coast.
Chicago date. I'd love to be there.
Oh, why do I open my mouth sometimes? I don't know.
Because you got a big mouth.
Right. One of the biggest news items in the last few days is learning that Paul McCartney will be releasing a book of photos that he took of the Beatles from late 1963 and early 1964 that he thought were lost for many years, but he rediscovered them in 2020. And what a find this was. It's almost 1,000 photographs that Paul took on his 35mm camera. The book itself will be called 1964 Eye of the Storm, and it will contain 275 photos from this period. A very significant time because it was when Beatlemania erupted in the UK, and after their first US visit, they became the most famous people on the planet. They will cover photos from 6 cities: Liverpool, London, Paris, New York, Washington, D.C., and Miami. There will also be commentary from Paul where he conveys his impressions of Britain and America in 1964. It'll be published by Penguin Books. It's 336 pages, and it's due out June 13th this year. Now, before I even heard about the book, I already learned that there would be a photo exhibit of these same photos, which will take place in London at the National Portrait Gallery to help mark their reopening in June after a 3-year refurbishment. It will run there from June 28th to October the 1st. Right?
I
So
guess-
looking forward to that book. It's
Yeah.
all
Guess
photo-
all you can-
Yes.
All you can say is, he's got some photographs. I mean, this is really cool. To find 1,000 pictures that you took from 63 to 64, I think that's amazing. I mean, obviously, Paul's probably not in a lot of those photographs since he's taking those photos, but just to see images from John, George, and Ringo as well is just as good as my book.
I know. It's kind of amazing to think that they were lost all these years.
Yeah.
Where could they have been?
Well, see, that's the thing is when we were told back in, I think it was 2012 by his manager at the time that everything of his was digitized, his music and his photos. So, obviously they missed a corner in the attic. So,
Yeah.
All right. But I'm definitely looking forward to that book. Legendary artist Dolly Parton just turned 77 on January 19th, and she announced that she'll be making a new album due out sometime this year to be called Rock Star, after having been honored to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which originally she rejected because she never thought of herself as a rock and roller. She is getting together many rock icons to record with, and Paul McCartney will be on the album, as will Stevie Nicks, John Fogerty, Steve Perry, Steven Tyler, and others. I know she's trying to get Mick Jagger on there. The plan is to cover classic songs with these artists, and she says she and Paul will be singing a song together.
Cool.
Very
I'm
cool.
excited about that because I love Dolly. She's not only a great talent, but she's a fantastic human being.
Yep.
I kind of wish it would be something original, though.
Yeah.
You know, a song from Dolly or a song that they would write together instead of just covering an old song. But hey,
Take what we can get.
Yeah.
and I just found out from a good friend, Madeline Baccaro, who is the author of that great new book on Yoko Ono, that Ian Hunter has a brand new album coming out April 21st. It's called Defiance Part 1. There you go. Thank you. Madeline's new book. And it includes, this Ian Hunter album includes a song called Bed of Roses, which has Ringo on drums and Mike Campbell on guitar. The song is all about the Star Club in Hamburg. It's an excellent rocker, and a new video can be found for it on YouTube. Ian has a star-studded cast on his album, including 2 recently departed rock stars. Jeff Beck is on there, and Taylor Hawkins.
Wow.
Stars, include Johnny Depp, Billy Gibbons, Todd Rundgren, Joe Elliott, Jeff Tweedy, Slash, and Waddy Wachtel. The album will be coming out on Sun Records. The Sun Records? And it's now available for pre-order. It's a great song, by the way. Check it out on YouTube. Ringo's drumming is it's rock solid. Just perfect for that song. There's a special issue out of the Ultimate Music Guide, and Paul is on the front cover, which reads the songwriter, the solo artist, the former Beatle, Paul McCartney, the full story of a legendary musician. The issue includes classic interviews and in-depth reviews of every solo album. Okay, Glenn Greenberg's new bookazine of Beatles trivia is now out. Although at the moment he tells me it's not listed on Amazon, you can get it at Barnes & Noble, most major supermarkets and pharmacy chains. Glenn is the author who recently wrote the bookazine for Time magazine for Paul McCartney's 80th birthday. And he was a guest on my channel. Did you interview him, Tom? I think you did.
Absolutely, and we got him scheduled for February to talk about the bookazine.
I know, he'll be on my channel too. All right, and I just recently heard back from someone that you interviewed just recently too, Luca Rossi, who released the excellent book Paul McCartney Recording Sessions 1969 to 2013. He told me his follow-up book will be coming out mid-February. It's called Paul McCartney Music is Ideas, the stories behind the songs, Volume 1. Where's that from, guys? Music is Ideas.
Trivia, no, on the spot.
Wow, that's.
I'm too busy looking at the comments.
Oh, you're all kidding. You have to be kidding. It's from Talk More Talk.
Oh,
no wonder I couldn't think of it.
That's one of the words that one of the phrases that is spoken before the song, before the lyrics start.
Word in the very beginning.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think it's
Good night, everybody. Wow.
Hey, I'm sorry, Luca, for that.
Again, another long title, Joe. I like those long titles.
Long title.
It is called, like I said, Paul McCartney Music is Ideas. It's the stories behind the songs, Volume 1. He says the volume will be 534 pages long. It's in big format, just like Paul McCartney's The Lyrics book. It has 346 song sheets, including 50 unreleased tracks.
Wow.
Real curious about that. In release order. It covers albums, concerts, interviews, vintage reviews, and it has over 1,000 footnotes. This book was actually published last year in May as an Italian edition.
Right.
All right. Also due out in February is a book by Tony King called The Tastemaker, My Life with the Legends and Geniuses of Rock Music. According to Amazon, they say The Tastemaker charts the singular life of a man who has been at the beating heart of music's most iconic moments for over 60 years and features stories of his time working with everyone from the Beatles to the Ronettes and Elton John to the Rolling Stones. An endorsement for this book reads, "This is a brilliant book by a brilliant man, a magician with perfect taste. Thank God I met him. He is gold dust." That comes from Elton John.
Mm.
All right, the Weaklings have just released their new single. It's a cover of the Beatles song "I've Just Seen a Face," and they've also made a new video for the song in which the band performs on a rooftop. Brand new idea they came up with. And it also features fellow Beatles podcaster Skylar Moody as a guitarist in the video. I'm calling
And
it.
Layla Ortiz as well, another
Mhm.
TikToker that
Who's
works with Skylar.
Okay.
Yeah. She plays Paul in
Okay.
the video.
What's her name?
Layla Ortiz
Okay.
is her name. Yeah, she and Skylar collaborate quite a bit on stuff on TikTok.
Mm,
Yep. So,
Okay.
yep, she plays the Paul part.
Very good.
Mhm.
All right, we have to note the passings of two very important people. Of course, we have to mention David Crosby. Crosby was part of the legendary band The Byrds, who had their own sound, but were certainly influenced by the Beatles. After watching the Beatles' first film, A Hard Day's Night, Roger McGuinn went and bought a Rickenbacker 12-string guitar, and David Crosby bought a Gretsch Tennessean that George Harrison played. George's song "If I Needed Someone" was influenced by the Byrds' "Bells of Rimney," and Crosby said that he introduced George to Ravi Shankar, who introduced Harrison to the sitar. And George Harrison gave Crosby the cape that he wore in the film Help. David got to visit the Beatles at Abbey Road when they had finished the Sgt. Pepper sessions, and he's quoted as saying, "I walked in and they were acting silly and strange and having fun because I think they were thrilled with what they had done. They knew what they had created. They sat me down in the middle of a room on a stool and they were laughing about it. They rolled over two of those huge coffin-sized speakers up on either side of me, and then they played me A Day in the Life. And when they got to the end of the piano chord, man, I was dish rag. I was floored. It took me several minutes to be able to talk after that." One of David's best quotes ever was when someone tried to compare the Byrds to the Beatles. And he said, "The Byrds weren't bug spray to the Beatles." As far as covering Beatles music, Crosby, Stills, and Nash covered the songs "Blackbird" and "In My Life." And at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 25th anniversary concert, Crosby, Nash, and Paul Simon performed "Here Comes the Sun." Also, David Crosby released a song he wrote called "Laughing" off his album "If I Could Only Remember My Name." He said it was, quote, you got it right there.
There you go.
Timing's always perfect there, Tom.
Near and dear to my heart.
You should be on Let's Make a Deal. You could always have produce everything.
Well, about the song "Laughing," this is what David had to say, quote, "It was written to and for George Harrison about the Maharishi. And the idea was telling him that nobody's really got the answer. And that people who try to tell you that they have the answer are most often trying to manipulate you." He
Good
said it.
point.
Graham Nash and Mitchell contribute beautiful background vocals on the song. Features members of the Grateful Dead on there as well. Very sad, of course, to learn about David Crosby. And we also mourn the loss of Barrett Strong. He was the original artist and co-writer behind the song "Money," which of course the Beatles covered, and John Lennon performed at the Live Peace in Toronto concert. Barrett wrote the song with Berry Gordy and Janet Bradford. And Barrett was one of Motown's original hit makers, and he co-wrote with his songwriting partner from Motown, Norman Whitfield, many classic Motown songs, like "I Heard It Through the Grapevine," which were hits for both Marvin Gaye and Gladys Knight and the Pips. Gladys actually had the hit first.
Right.
Yep.
Also, the classic "War," as recorded by Edwin Starr, later covered by Bruce Springsteen, and some Temptations classic songs. Just my Imagination." I'm all choked up here. "Just My Imagination" and "Ball of Confusion," which mentions the Beatles, and the Temptation song called "Cloud 9." Barrett was 81.
Gosh, this is the first time hearing about this.
Like 2
Oh,
days
wow.
ago.
I didn't know
2 days
that.
ago. Yeah.
Just in the last couple of days, he passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, he was a huge part of Motown's success, both part, money being, first single, but also, yeah, huge behind the scenes
Hmm.
figure. So, another great loss.
Think about all the people who have covered his songs, especially Money. And I remember
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Tremendous talent. Some concert information as we speak tonight, January 30th, at the City Winery in New York. There's a show called The Lads from Liverpool. I only found out about this in the last couple of days. Billy J. Kramer, Joey Molland, and Terry Sylvester all performing on stage. If I know about any more dates with these three together, I'll be sure to relay it on this show, on our Facebook page. I'll put it on my website. I actually have a page on my website, Concerts and Events for Beatle fans in New York, New England. So any dates from them, if there are more of them, I will post there as well. City Winery also will have a concert by the Weaklings, and that will be on February the 5th. And they have Denny Lane performing on February the 7th. One concert that I mention on my podcast shows every year, if I get the chance, is the Concert for Bangladesh Revisited. This is by a band from Long Island called Wondrous Stories. They recreate the entire Concert for Bangladesh, not just George's songs, everything else. The Bob Dylan material, Leon Russell, Billy Preston, Ringo. And they're doing a concert at the Space on Long Island on February 24th, the day before George's birthday. It is an amazing show. It's one of the best concerts I've ever been to. They usually have special guests performing on stage. They've had Denny Lane there, Steve Holly. Gene Cornish from the Rascals has performed with them. And if you can, please go to that concert. If you live in the area, you won't want to miss it. It's a long show. They not only do that, but they usually do a Beatles album on top of that to follow that with. The last time I saw the show, it was 3.5 hours. It's a tremendous show. Again, at the Space on Long Island, February 24th. On the other podcast that I do, Things We Said Today, we just did an interview, a really wonderful interview with Gary Burr, who you know from many years recording with Ringo and the Roundheads, still occasionally works with Ringo, known for, the years with Mark Hudson especially, but he's had a tremendous career as a songwriter, especially in the country field. He and his wife, Georgia Middleman, who's also had a long history of success as a songwriter with country artists. They're performing at the Cutting Room in New York City, and that'll be on May the 19th. Good guy, Gary Burr. So, yeah,
Tom,
on there.
shock.
Sorry about that, guys.
Boy,
I'm trying to see how much power I had left on my tablet. Sorry.
Thought you looked like Rick Rubin there.
Bro.
Well, photo, I couldn't tell. So, yeah, that's it for the news this time out.
Did we
Wow.
mention Jeff Beck last show?
I'm not sure. Yeah, of course, Jeff Beck, one of our.
I don't know if you mentioned him.
Of course, his years in the Yardbirds, the connections with the Beatles. I know Paul had a very nice tribute that he posted online for him. I guess they were the closer friends than we were aware, him and his wife. And Jeff covered She's a Woman on his Blow by Blow album. He also did a great version of A Day in the Life.
Yeah.
Tremendous talent. One of our greatest guitarists ever. So losing a lot of great people.
So far, it's been a rough year. Yeah. Wow.
It's only a month in.
Yeah.
We learned about Cindy Williams today.
It's interesting. Yeah, from Cindy Williams, of course, Laverne and Shirley, also American Graffiti, among other things. It's funny, we were talking before the show, we were talking about Cindy Williams, just finding out that she'd passed on. And Ken, I think it was pointing out how in Laverne and Shirley, especially the later episodes, you have the Beatles poster that they say goodbye to every morning.
Yeah, they
Laverne
kiss.
and Shirley,
Yeah.
give it a little kiss. And it's funny because I noticed that Tim Allen in the comments brought that up.
Right.
He said, yeah, rest in peace, Cindy
And
Williams who had a Beatle poster. You
if
know,
I if I'm correct, somebody can fact check me in the audience here. She had a brother-in-law who we've mentioned on the show many times, and I believe it was Mark Hudson.
I think she was married to a Hudson. Yeah, I mean not Mark, but
No, I think yeah. So somebody can fact check me on that. I learned earlier that she had her for a while her brother-in-law was Mark Hudson.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
So please fact check me on that, please.
Mhm.
Okay, let's go.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay, everyone. Now, yeah, so we're going to be talking about our choices for what we feel are the most underrated solo Beatles albums. One we're going to pick from each. And everybody seems to have different ideas of what underrated means. But we were talking a little about this. Underrated is pretty much something that doesn't really get highly thought of, right, in the Beatles solo circle. Uh, maybe it even had gotten to number one or something at one time, but yet somehow is not well thought of as much or forgotten about a lot these days. You
Mhm.
know, it has to be something that's not yeah universally loved out there. You would never say, well, gee, I think Band on the Run is an underrated album. It's just, although it's funny how things can change. Like I would say that these days the Beatles Sergeant Pepper album right now is getting underrated.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny how that goes? You would never think you'd say that, but lately that's getting underrated. Uh, so we're trying to keep it, I guess, current, what we think.
Mhm.
So I thought that first we'd start with George Harrison. I can see what order we'll do them, and I just have them mixed up here. And I thought this time we'll start with Kenneth Michaels because I always seem to find out that he's going to last a lot, and I'll put him first for this one.
Okay. Thank you, Joseph. Um, I'm gonna go with Gontrapo, mainly because of the fact that usually whenever I read comments from fans in general, they kind of dump on this album. There's always going to be those fans out there that are more supportive than others. But because of the fact that the album didn't do very well when it first charted, and because George didn't promote it, it charted very poorly. And he didn't really care at the time. He was just fulfilling his contract with Warner Brothers. It was the last album in his contract. He just wanted to put it out there. But there's so much really good stuff on there. And I love really just every song on Gontrapo. I think it was a very, well done album. I like it so much better than Somewhere in England, his previous album. And, the production on it is stellar. Every instrument is heard so well. I love all the percussive stuff on the title track of Gontrapo. I love his ballads, like Baby Don't Run Away, Unknown Delight, which I believe, even though George never talked about most of the songs from the album, Unknown Delight sure sounds like it's about Danny. Um, I love Baby Don't Run Away a lot. Dream Away is an outstanding song, which we first heard in Time Bandits. I'm glad that he brought back Circles from the Beatle days from 1968. Was working on. They made the demo that you heard on the White Album box set. Mystical One is fantastic. I love his guitar work on there. Really, everything, even I Really Love You is a surprise, mainly because of the fact that, and I think I brought this up before, there's really just harmonies throughout the whole song. You don't really hear a lead vocal from George on it, but his voice is mixed just a little bit hotter than everybody else, so you do hear it. So it's kind of different in that way. And he picked a relatively obscure song from a group called the Stereos.
Yeah.
And when you hear the sound of like the foot beats in there that start at the very beginning and at the very end, I tend to think of the Beatles Christmas message that starts out that way. It's, I don't know how my brain works. But I always loved That's the Way It Goes. I like Wake Up My Love, despite, what a lot of people say about the synthesizer sound, that it's very 80s. I don't mind when an artist tries to sound contemporary. I love the song itself. I love Grease as an instrumental. I just think overall it's a really solid album. And, every now and then there'll be some fans that feel that it deserves to get bumped up a bit and respected more. And I like seeing that. But overall, anytime these days people talk about George's solo stuff, everybody raves about All Things Must Pass, and deservedly so, and usually Cloud Nine. And I like seeing the respect being given to 33 and a Third and George Harrison, especially.
Yeah.
I think the period from Living in a Material World with Dark Horse and Extra Texture gets slighted these days. And I think Brainwash is very respected as an album. But Gon Troppo was lost in the shuffle with some of those other George Harrison albums, and I think that it really merits considerable attention. There's a lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah, good pick.
Yeah.
Good pick. Okay, Kit, what do you have for George Harrison?
Well, this pick, kind of surprises myself as much as anything, because this is an album that took took some time to grow on me, and that's Somewhere in England. This was, I would have said before George Harrison or 33 and a Third, but I feel like those have really grown in appreciation over the years. So I
Especially
decided,
George Harrison. Yeah.
exactly. Yep. So I decided to go with something different, and that's Somewhere in England. And I did not like this album when I first heard it many years ago. I thought it, other than all those years ago, I thought it was one of his weaker albums. But over time, as I've listened to it, I thought, there are some gems on here. It's not, a completely consistent album, but I mean, I've actually grown to like Blood from a Clone.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, what cojones this guy had to write, this song and put it, on the first, the first track of the album, basically, a middle finger to the, the record execs who made him, change so much of the album and said, we need a hit, we need something more up tempo. And he said, oh, do you want that? Some papa? Here you go.
Nothing like Frank Zappa.
Yeah, like Frank Zappa. I mean, that's really, I admire that. I just think, and it's kind of catchy. It's kind of a catchy song. Life itself, I mean, that's a beautiful, beautiful song. I think, and it's one of, one of his, spiritual songs, and it's one of those where it can kind of be whatever you want it to be, whatever is meaningful to you, whatever spiritual meaning you want to give it, and beautiful vocal performance from him as well. And all those years ago, of course, we know great song that is. I like that which I have lost. I think that is a great song lyrically, contrasting dark and light, saying, saying to bring him out of the dark, remove the dark from in me and give me that which I have lost. It's a really beautiful, beautiful imagery in it. Love that kind of country twang to it. And Willie Weeks, as always, props to him. His bass is all over this album, and I love his work. Writing's on the Wall, even though it's kind of a sad sentiment, it's still, I think, it really makes you think. It's kind of, life is fleeting, and so you better think about how you're living your life, and and material things are not. Investing your entire life in material things, you better think about what you're doing. Hong Kong Blues is kind of one of his Hoagie Carmichael covers. And we love it. I think we all love his Hoagie Carmichael obsession, and you see that here. I mean, really, the only criticism I have is leaving off Flying Hour. I mean, that is such a great song. He never should have left that song off. I mean, that's thankfully in the remastered editions, always it's now included as a bonus track, and I mean I love that song, but I really, despite a few tracks that I don't love on here, there are some really lyrically beautiful songs, some great vocal performances from him on here. I don't think it really deserved the critical drubbing that it got at the time. I think there are some buried gems in here, and so I'm surprised to say 15 20 years ago I never would have said this, but I think it's an underrated album of George's.
All right.
I tell you though, writings on the wall, thank you for saying that. The lyrics of that song are just so powerful.
They are.
The words really flow so well.
Yeah, I mean, really, they make you think. It's like he's talking directly to you.
Yeah. I think if I can remember exactly, strange we hold on to things that have no grace or power, while death holds on to us much more with every passing hour.
Yeah.
Very strong message.
Yep. It's and the writings on the wall, brother. Your life is in your hands. It's up to you to see the writings on the wall.
Right.
I mean, it's up to you how you live your life, and just really makes you think.
Yeah. There's one thing I wish I knew, and maybe if any of our viewers can tell us, did George pick the 4 songs that were taken off the original Somewhere in England, or was that?
I always thought they didn't. The company studio, Warner Brothers, didn't want certain songs, but I'm not sure of that 100%. But that's what I always heard.
I don't know. I've heard read elsewhere that George chose to take off Flying Hour, Lay His Head. Is it Sat? Cheers, Cheers the World, and Sat Standing, I think was the other one.
Sat Singing.
Sat Singing, thank you. Yeah.
It's funny though, because it makes more sense that George picked them, because why? I was wondering why they would leave Blood from a Clone on, although unless they, if that was the case, they just weren't paying any attention.
That was one of
the new. Probably inspiring him after that.
But can you imagine that the record execs heard Blood from a Clone and were like, "Oh, great, let's lay that." In fact,
I bet they didn't have any idea.
The kickoff of the whole album. I think that's awesome that George did that.
Yeah,
good for him.
But whoever decision it was to take Flying Hour off.
Yeah, wrong.
Zoom. Yeah, I know. All right, Tom, what do you got for George Harrison's most underrated?
Well, sometimes when an artist has a long career and they keep producing good to great albums midway or later into their good career or their career, it sometimes it's hard to sometimes it's easy to forget those earlier albums, even though those early albums were successful. I mean, it could be another number one album, and it could be easily forgotten. And in that case, here lately, over the last 10 years, people talk very highly of 33 1/3, George Harrison, All Things Must Pass, Cloud 9, Brainwash. Those are the 5 albums that lately, over the last decade, I've really been hearing people talk about, which leaves off, Living in the Material World, which, I know this is your favorite album of all time, but I mean, I don't hear anybody talking about this album much anymore, which is a shame, because you got a number one song on there, Give Me Love. I mean, how can you ignore that? If you wanted to know what was going on in the world of Beatles, you got Sue Me Sue You Blues. You knew exactly what was going on. The Don't Let Me Wait Too Long, we talked about that as the single that never was, and it was set up to be, but it was pulled at the last minute. Living in the Material World, Try Some, Buy Some. A lot of really good songs on here. And then sometimes, listen, I sometimes word of mouth can reach far. They got long arms sometimes, and I know people have said that this album can be preachy. Maybe this was his preaching practices album. I don't know, but that's up for you to decide to listen to the album, and for you to make that decision. Don't listen to other people. If you're curious about this album, listen to it and make up your own decision. But this is an album that I just don't hear a lot of anymore, and that's a shame. I mean, this was a very successful album, going to #1. Like I said, I think this knocked off Red Rose Speedway off the top of the charts, right, Ken? He had the #1 song and the #1 album at the same time. I mean, that is a very rare feat, especially back then, with so much variety of music back then. So I just find it interesting, as much as I do like this album. And yeah, maybe it might be preachy here and there, but that doesn't take away from its greatness. I think every song on here is well sung, well produced, well written. And yeah, I might even forget about this album sometimes, which is a shame. But it's a really, really good album, and one that I think that should be considered one of his top 5, top 3. I know, Ken, I know where you've got it, buddy.
Yeah.
But so yeah, Living in the Material World, really interesting album.
It's a great album. It's a great album. Overlooked for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know why that is. Maybe because of in some people's minds, like you said, what you call preachy, or a little too spiritual for some. For me,
Right.
it took later years for me to really love it. As I got older, I seem to love it a lot more. I don't know. It spoke to me more as I got
Right.
older, and I'll even suggest that there's preachy stuff, quote unquote, on All Things Must Pass also. But
Mhm.
I mean, not maybe not as a whole as much, you know, and it
All,
works fine there.
All
Yeah.
Things Must Pass, I think, is a much more commercial sounding album.
Mhm.
I think Living in the Material World is a much deeper album when it comes to his spiritual stuff. And a lot of people can't handle that.
Right.
Want George to be light. They love more, even though they're spiritual and All Things Must Pass. But, every
Mhm.
now and then you'll run into someone who prefers the catchier Cloud Nine, Cracker Box Palace, the
Yep.
humorous side of George, as opposed to songs where he's really speaking his mind about his spiritual journey and the state of the world, stuff like that. And a lot of people don't care for that side of George as
Right.
much. But
And then
I like to say, I always make this parallel. This is kind of his Plastic Ono Band.
mm,
For people
yeah,
that really admire John for speaking his mind as he did and to bare his soul in Plastic Ono Band, I think Living in the Material World is very much like that.
right. And there's a lot of spiritual images, throughout the album too. You got, I mean, the cover, the inside, jacket, so, I don't condone him for, bringing that into, the popular world. I mean, look, I mean, he made it popular with, with, what, oh, what song I'm talking about.
My Sweet Lord. No, I
My
don't know if
Sweet
that's the
Lord,
one you're
thank you.
thinking
I
of.
don't know why that just, lost my mind there, but
Good for you, George. Good for
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Good for you.
yeah,
We need
A
more
lot
of that now, in my opinion.
of people explored Eastern religion,
right,
meditation because of George Harrison.
Sure.
yeah,
The Beatles first, and then later with his solo career. He deserves a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely.
okay.
Well, I guess that leaves me for George Harrison, and I'm not going to spend too much time, especially if it's already been mentioned.
Oh,
Yay!
Somewhere in England.
hitting
I was
Joe.
thinking,
Fist bump.
yeah. Boom. I was thinking about this. Trying to think which one I think is really underrated, and well, there's more than one. Yeah, obviously, yeah, your mileage may vary, but yeah, Kit pretty much nailed it. I don't think this is like, I wouldn't say, oh, this is a great album. This is one of George's best. It
Right.
wouldn't be in my top 4 or 5 of George, But yeah, I think it's better than most people think. We already talked about Blood from a Clone, great opener. It really like sticks it to the record companies. I love that. And Unconsciousness Rules is a
Yeah,
good
that's a
good
good one
second
too.
Yeah.
track that I like. Life Itself, we already said, very spiritual, gorgeous song. Um, all those years ago. Now I'm glad that all those years ago exists. At the time, it was so good to hear after John was killed to hear somebody kind of pay a tribute to George. I again I don't think that one is such a great song. I think it's a little awkward, a little clumsy here and there, but
Mm.
it brings back memories of that time for me, and I still like hearing it. Even though I like something like "Here Today," say better as a tribute. You know, or even "Empty Garden" by Elton John. I mean, I'm not getting into the comparison game, so to speak, but
Mhm.
I just thought of it as I'm talking about it. Now, of course, Baltimore Oriole was not mentioned, and I forget if Kit was somebody who doesn't care for that track or
Mm,
not. We've talked
it's
about
not
this
my
album
favorite.
before because
Mhm.
Ken and I love it. I know that I love Baltimore Oriole. I love that song, and I love those horns on there.
Mhm.
And we've talked a lot about it. Look at past shows. We did a whole show uh, somewhere in England to see if it was as bad as they say or as underrated, if, overlooked. We did a show on another listen for this. Teardrops
Mhm.
is a real good pop song that I think could have been a hit single, should have been a hit single.
Well, it was
Um,
released as a single in
Was
yeah,
certain countries.
the top
Yeah.
40.
it didn't
It's
do
fun.
what I would expect it to do.
Mhm.
And that also could fit maybe as I don't know. I haven't read it up in the book, which I got up there. I took it down and put it on the bookshelf. The George Harrison book, where what he says about teardrops. I don't know if that's necessarily about John, but it fits the scenario. John after he was murdered. About so hard to take. I got to soak in with those teardrops, and et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I like the song. I like the words in it, and I like the tempo of it, which is George was accused of not having too many like up tempo songs, rockers really a lot. Uh, I think that works really well. Nobody said anything, and rightly so, about "Save the World." I still think
Yeah.
it's in my
I
least George Harrison song
I kind of skipped
list.
over that one.
But why mention it? I'm just saying it politely. It's just not for me.
Yes.
How's that?
Yeah, I'll agree. I agree.
Okay,
Not
okay.
for me.
But that takes care of it, Mr. Harrison. All right.
Good.
So, okay, good. Now we're gonna move on to Mr. Starkey, Ringo Starr. Okay, we're gonna save John and Paul for later. Um, Tom, I'll start with you for a choice for an underrated Ringo album.
Well, we talked about this album late last year. For Record Store Day, we got the new reissue on vinyl and CD for this album, and we're talking Old Wave. Criminally underrated, and disrespected, only being released in Germany and Canada. I mean,
And
it's
rightly so.
again, just yeah, just
No, not rightly so. Not right. Excuse me. I take it back. Regardless of how I feel about the album, it should be released
oh
generally.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and it should have been, and a lot of people shouldn't have waited 40 years or whatever it was to finally get it released in the good old US. We talked about this. I think the first 8 tracks are as good as a lot of his better, what you want to call better albums, where you got Ringo or Goodnight Vienna and Time Takes Time in those early Mark Hudson albums. I think him and Joe Walsh, we talk about that chemistry that they have together and how well they work together. I think Joe did a great job, helping Ringo put this album together. In my car, Hopeless, which I wish he would do more songs like those comedy songs that he does so well, those everyman songs. Picture Show Life, I think is wonderful. She's About a Mover, which might be the only song you like, right, Joe, on the album? She's About a Mover.
I like She's About a Mover. I like Hopeless. I love She's About a Mover, that version.
Yeah.
I like Hopeless.
Yeah.
And I could tolerate In My Car and maybe Alibi a little bit.
Yeah. If I have a complaint, I think maybe it could have been produced a little better, maybe mixed a little better. I don't know. But like we said, I mean, who really cared about Ringo at that point in time in the 80s? Not a lot of people, unfortunately. Yeah, maybe some of the music he was putting out wasn't, Ringo status, unfortunately, but this is a really good album, Old Wave. If you haven't listened to it yet, please check it out. Send me your address. I'll mail this to you because I got the reissue, and
Oh,
just listen, just give it a shot. Come on, Old Wave.
Damn it.
Listen to it.
okay, Tom.
Or
Wow,
Tom's
wow.
gonna come find you.
Yeah,
That's some
Coming
love
after
for
you.
Old Wave. Oh man. All right. Sticking with Ringo, let's go with Ken next.
Okay. Well, by the way, I do think that I wish that Ringo would do a lot more with Joe Walsh, because I think that they have really good chemistry together. And I love the whole sound of Old Wave. I had never had a problem with the production behind it.
Really? Okay.
But anyway, Ringo's career, I mean, aside from the diehards and people who care enough to follow us, to be realistic, he hasn't had a decent selling album since Goodnight Vienna.
All right.
Let's tell the truth here. That doesn't mean that he hasn't done some outstanding work since then. When people in general talk about Ringo's catalog, they rave about the Ringo album. Bukusa Blues gets a lot of respect, and people like myself that wish that Ringo would do another country album. And we've talked on this show a lot about how Time Takes Time was like the start of really kind of a renaissance for Ringo. It was such a perfect album. And I look at, after the Ringo album, the best albums that Ringo made were Time Takes Time through, say, Choose Love. And I like all the post-Mark Hudson stuff as well. But as far as top tier Ringo, it's those albums that I think the most highly of. And let's face it, none of those albums sold very well. And apart from the diehard fans, who knows about them? Really. And the material is really strong on all those albums. And it's very tough for me to pick any one of those and single them out and say, this is the most underrated. When it comes to the Mark Hudson stuff, I tend to look at Ringo Rama as being the strongest, possibly. But man, I love a lot of stuff on Vertical Man and Choose Love. And Time Takes Time is an outstanding album. It's just, there's a lot of material on Ringo Rama. I love the whole chemistry of Mark Hudson, Gary Burr, Steve Dudas. They were a great team. And I'm glad that Gary is still working with Ringo. Occasionally, Steve Dudas still works with Ringo. Some of the songs on Ringo Rama are just outstanding, especially Instant Amnesia, which has Ringo doing this drum solo where he rarely ever, does drum solos. And I know I asked Mark Hudson, why hasn't he done more of those? And he said, he doesn't know. Ringo was in the mood at that moment, and he just went with it. And, Never Without You is a great tribute to George Harrison. Eye to Eye, I love as a great opening track. Missouri Loves Company. What a great, play on words. Which actually, when we interviewed Gary Burr on Things We Said Today, he said the lyrics came from Dean Grakel. It was the son of Bruce Grakel, who was like Ringo's lawyer. Dean actually passed away recently. But great, fun lyrics where, you can apply a state or a city with the name of a female, and it can go either way in the song. Kind of like Georgia on My Mind is, Very clever. There's so much really good stuff. They're all well-constructed songs, and I've always liked Mark Hudson's production. And, I could pick anything from Time Takes Time through Choose Love and say it's the most underrated in Ringo's catalog. But because I think Ringo Rama is the best of the bunch, I think I'll go with that.
Interesting. Very good. Very well said.
Imagine me there. Oh, there's a great song.
Oh man, that's great.
Yeah, we
Imagine
talked
me
about
there.
that with Gary Burr. One of his best ballads.
Mm.
Yeah, and then that's why Beatle fans who won't give Ringo a chance. I'm thinking of somebody out there. I won't say who it is, but we,
I think the casual fan would love something like um, instant amnesia. You know, if they didn't never gave that album a chance, I think if they listened to that album, I think that song would be one that they would gravitate towards.
well, what about Ringo doing a drum solo? Like I said, a drum solo. You don't get drum solos.
No, but I think they would find
Really.
it interesting enough, that they
Yeah,
would really
yeah.
enjoy it.
So I'm saying, that's what, yeah, for those people out there, that's what I was going to say. You think, well, Ringo never did drum solos. Well, here he's doing a drum solo. You don't know
Yeah.
what you might find that you like with there's
Mm.
some good Ringo tracks that you're missing, folks.
Mhm.
Really, even if you
Yep.
don't love all the albums or the whole album, you're missing some good Ringo stuff out there.
Right.
Free your soul. Listen to some Ringo. All right,
Good song.
Ringo. Okay, so that's Kit. We're up to you for Ringo. What do you have for
Okay.
underrated?
Okay. Well, normally I would say Time Takes Time, but I've talked about that album a lot, so I thought I better pick something else. And so I chose something from the post Mark Hudson era, and I believe it's the first album that Ringo produced or kind of co-produced with Bruce Sugar, and that's Why Not. And I really have kind of affection for this album because I remember I reviewed it when it came out, and I was really excited to hear what he would do, Ringo, as a producer. And while again it's not entirely consistent, it's still there's some good tracks on here. And let me just get this out of the way right now. We're just going to pretend Who's Your Daddy never
I knew you
existed.
were going to say that.
So
I was thinking of you, Kit. There's some Matthew Street had showed a new compilation spanning Ringo's career. It's like 4 CDs. It's an unusual
mhm,
release. Let's put it that way.
yeah.
Different. And Who's Your Daddy was on it. I'm like, are you kidding?
Are you
I couldn't.
kidding me? Yep, yeah.
Yeah, I
So we're
couldn't
we're
believe
just
it.
going to pretend that's not on the album. That never happened. Okay. So let's talk about the other tracks then.
Okay, good stuff.
And there's some really fun tracks and really good ones. Peace Dream, I do like the nods.
Love it.
Yep, I do love the nods to John on that. And normally I
do.
don't like, normally I think sometimes Ringo can go a little overboard with the Beatle nods and all that. But this one, I do like the nods to John in the lyrics. It's kind of touching,
I
when
agree.
he does it. Yeah, I do like
It works
that.
there. It works
works
nicely there,
there.
even though we're usually belly aching about that. But for some reason,
It works on
I
that
like it.
track,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely. And then the other side of Liverpool, I really like that song. I of all the Liverpool songs he's done, that may be my favorite.
Me too.
Yeah, is I like the shout outs to friends and then who helped him, and the backing vocals. Cindy Gomez, I think is the name of the vocalist. I mean, she really kills it on that. But I just like, and the organ. I mean, the organ on that. The Billy Squire and Dave Stewart, I think, are on guitar on that track. It has kind of a little bit of a grittiness to it, which I really like. I mean, he still clearly loves Liverpool, but wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, and he makes that clear, which I like. Walk With You is a lovely song, duetting with Paul, of course, and they I wish they had done more tracks like that together. Their voices blend very well. Of course, they've worked together a little bit, and so it's not a big surprise. And the violin on there is a lovely touch as well. And really the band on here in general, and of course he has loads of guests that we all know and love, like Don Was, Billy Squire, Joe Walsh, makes an appearance. Just a solid group here. Can't Do It Wrong, co-written with Gary Burr. You mentioned him earlier. Got, has some nice whimsical lyrics to it. And Edgar Winter, I think, is on that track. I think it just has some solid songs on it that really support Ringo quite well. And I think Ringo's voice sounds strong on it. And so, do I love every single track on it? No, but I think it really shows Ringo, could produce himself fairly well. I was very, at the time that I first heard it, I was very impressed, and thought, hey, he'll do just fine. He'll be fine without Mark Hudson and all that. He's on to a new phase, and I I thought, hey, if it sounds like this, he'll be able to go on to the next phase of his career and be just fine. And so I really wanted to draw attention to this album because I think it is worth another listen, as we say on this show. And there's some thank you, Tom. And and there's some good songs on here, some very gems. So do check out Why Not.
Why not check it out?
Why not?
And I happen to agree with you on this, almost just about every word.
Mhm.
I really like that album a lot, and I think it's
Mhm.
one of his better later albums.
Mhm.
And
But
I like Everyone Wins as well. I like
Mhm.
that's another one that's on it. I like, and the song Why Not. I like. Uh, yeah. So yeah,
The song Time is
Yes.
mm,
interesting.
yeah,
Bill co-wrote that
yeah.
with Dave Stewart. It's very different from anything else he'd done before. Kind of has a light jazz feel to it, kind of sparse.
Mhm.
Doesn't go in the direction that most Ringo songs do. And isn't Mystery of the Night on there too?
Yes.
Mhm.
That's
That's
yeah,
another.
all signs of things to come. Mystery of the Night, I love a lot because, well, for one thing, he wrote that with Richard Marx, and I like
Mhm.
all the songs that he's written with Richard Marx. And if you take a look at all the people that he's collaborated with on Why Not, it was a sign of what was to come on future albums because those
Right.
same people, Dave Stewart, Joe Walsh, Richard Marx, Van Dyke Parks,
Yep.
some of those same people are repeated on you know, the next few.
I don't know why. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's one of the better charting albums that he had.
Yes, I think
I
you're
think
right.
58 on Billboard, maybe,
Yep,
if
I
I'm
think
not
you're right.
mistaken.
I'd have to look. I thought it was like around 100, but
yeah.
we can always double.
I think
Yeah.
it got him. Take a look at that,
I
folks, to
think
see.
you're right that it may have gotten briefly to
I think
58.
the other side of Liverpool is one of the more interesting of the Liverpool songs musically.
Mhm.
I kind
Yes.
of enjoy that one, the direction they went into musically on that one.
Yep.
I enjoy that one a bunch.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
like the words in there, and still, it looks like it shows a little bit how, if I'm reading the lyrics literally, about how he wants to get out of there a little bit because it has
Yeah,
it says about the line, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
What is it? The other side of Liverpool is cold and damp.
Holy damn.
Yes.
Only
The
way
only
out.
way out of there,
Yep.
Guitar and amp, I
Drums,
think it was something
drums,
like that.
guitar, and
hard
amp.
drums, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's again, that's what I liked about it. That he was, he was honest about it. I mean, he didn't hate it, but I mean, as I said, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't for him, right? I mean, the Dingle was a tough
Yeah,
area. I mean, and I mean it was
the
you
other
know,
side.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and he
Yeah,
performed that during that time. He performed that song
yeah, I
on a
did.
lot of
Yeah,
shows.
Mm,
You know,
shows, yeah. Daily
mm-hmm.
Show, I think it was.
um,
Good song.
when it comes to Ringo Starr, I mean, I have like a few albums that I'm thinking. Uh, I wore my Ringo button and nobody could see it, but anyway,
I can see it.
some,
Yep, I see it.
anyway, there's a few I could say, and I feel like I've talked about these anytime we talk about underrated Ringo albums. I was going to say Bad Boy, which I was going to talk about, but which is one of his most underrated in my
I
estimation.
agree.
But I decided to go with this one. We talked about this too. Stop and Smell the Roses. Somebody didn't like this one too much. Is it you, Tom, or am I imagining things?
I think
Somebody
you
wasn't
might
well
be
with that.
imagining things.
Oh, okay. Imagine me there. Yeah, imagining things. But yeah, Stop and Smell the Roses from 1981. he's trying to recapture the formula. We always try to do that with a little help from his friends, right? Like what he did with the Ringo self-titled album and how he did with Goodnight Vienna. This is like that. It's got Rack My Brain on here, which should have been a bigger hit, but
Yeah.
there was a video that was out and it made MTV, made the rounds. And I think Rack My Brain is a fine song that George wrote for Ringo. Private Property, open. It's
Yeah.
open. I said this once that it's a Paul McCartney track, but I didn't think it was anything like one of Paul's best or anything. But I think it fits Ringo, and I think it's a great opener. And I
Mhm.
think it really starts this album off strongly. And I even like stuff like "Drumming Is My Madness," which I think is that the Harry Nilsson
Yep.
uh,
Mhm.
track. And I take that completely tongue in cheek. Ringo having a blast talking about him as himself as a drummer and playing it up. Uh, I love the track "Stop and Take the Time to Smell the Roses" and the video that goes with it. It's just a complete tour de force. Ringo just completely letting it all out and being zany as anything. It's a zany, fun track if you take it in the right spirit. I'm noticing I like every song on here. Dead Giveaway. Now is that Ron Wood? I'm trying to remember who wrote these songs.
Yes, that was
Dead
Ron.
Dead Giveaway. I love that. That's a I don't know what you call that, like a kind of like intense kind of track that I like, and it's got some good guitar on there. Lawrence Juber is on this. This might be the album where they credit him as Lawrence Tuber by accident.
Tuber, Tuber.
I think I remember. You remember
On the
that as
original
well.
LP, on the original LP, yeah, it was Tuber, but when the CD came out in the early '90s, they fixed it.
They fixed it. Then you're talking about the cover version of "You Belong to Me." Ringo really like zips that up and makes it a little bit more fun. I have a good time with that. And "Sure to Fall," the track that the Beatles did, as well is fun. "You've Got a Nice Way" is
That's a
is
good
really
song.
a pretty song, I think. Stephen Stills. The only thing really for me that kind of ruins the album, if it's not perfect, is "Back Off Boogaloo." I don't know what you call it, like the first time Ringo really went crazy saying Beatle titles
Oh
in
yeah.
everything, and that might have been with Harry Nilsson too, if I'm not mistaken.
Was. It's kind of
But
reminiscent of what Harry did early on with "You Can't Do That."
you can't do that. I heard that
Oh right.
single. There's a single of that I found somewhere
Mm.
in the record store. But I mean, I can listen to it, for a lark. But I actually like what he did. The song "Postcards from Paradise," which it's kind of like we were talking about. Kit was mentioning with like the song "Peace Dream," how for some reason we didn't mind the John Lennon reference in there. I don't mind when he does the song "Postcards from Paradise" because I just think he's sitting down going, "Okay, I'm going to just do a song where it's just I'm going to think of every Beatles name song that can come up. I'll work into this thing and
Mhm.
just do it all in one song."
Yeah.
I take that for what it is too, but that's another album for another show, perhaps, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I
Mhm.
really think this is good. It's got a lot of good people on it. Should have done better. John Lennon was going to be on this album, contribute to this album, but we know what happened, unfortunately. And yeah,
And I don't know if with all four or all three, sorry, all three of them on there, I don't know if it would have helped. Whether
mm,
or not life begins at 40, if that was going to be one of the tracks or what. I mean, you know, I don't know if people cared that much.
They
Mm.
weren't.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
"Rain" is a really strong song for a single, and that one only went to number 38.
Yeah,
Right.
that should have
yeah.
done way better. I thought that was a great song.
Yeah, that was a good tune. I like that. A good track,
Mhm.
a good
Top
single.
40 was abandoning Ringo for quite a while. I mean, after "A Dose of Rock and Roll," which did okay, went to number 26. All the singles after that didn't do well at all. But I like what you said about songs like "Drumming Is My Madness." If like you were like what Tom was saying, if you like a song like "Hopeless," if you like the
Mhm.
good side of Ringo, the more up
Yeah,
songs, "Drumming Is My Madness" and "Stop and Smell the Roses" are more to your liking.
yeah,
And
Mhm.
yeah.
I love
Zany.
living at the end of "Stop and Smell the Roses."
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Take
I
Take the
remember
time.
Buy
buy
this
this
out.
album, etc.
And
I remember I was moderating one show, and you know how at the end I'll put in a Ringo lyric,
Yeah.
and then I did stop and take it, and you two were kind of like, well, take it back because I did it pretty loud. I said it pretty loudly, so
Yeah.
that's pretty funny.
Joe, you never mention attention.
Oh, I never mentioned that. Wait, did I miss it?
That's okay. That's
By
okay.
the way, no, I really did miss it. My eyes just, I do like Attention by Attention, another Paul McCartney song, which I have fun with. Again, I think it's good for Ringo. You know,
Very good.
my eyes just scanned past it, folks. Sorry, I would have mentioned it if I'd seen it. I do like that song. I don't know if I'd want to hear Paul doing it, unless it's because I associate it so much with Ringo. Although there was a little while ago, anybody here? There was a little snippet that
Right.
got out of the audio of Paul doing Attention,
I think I heard that.
which was fun. Which was fun actually.
Yeah.
So, all right. So next, I think we'll move on to John Lennon, and for this one, Kit, we're going to start with you for an underrated John Lennon album.
Okay. Now, of course, we unfortunately have a smaller, pool to choose from, and somebody commented on our when I put up the notice of our next episode on YouTube that there are no underrated John Lennon albums. And well, I mean, I think that there are definitely
Poor John.
oh,
Tom
Tom
disappeared.
Tom disappeared. He'll be back.
Come
He'll
back,
be back.
Tom. We didn't get to Paul yet.
Yeah, right. He'll be back. So I think though, underrated, I know, is kind of a relative term here, but even though this, of course, had 2 hits from the album, I think Walls and Bridges is still not mentioned as often as Imagine, Plastic Ono Band, and probably Double Fantasy. Probably those are the 3 that you hear about most often. And I think Walls and Bridges' time is coming. I think, oh, Tom's coming back. Okay, let me admit it. I think, it really, you just don't hear about it as often as those other albums. And I know we've talked about it before on our show, but I mean, there's so many incredible tracks on it. It's really, it's a little bit Plastic Ono Band light in a way, because it's just as emotional. Welcome back, Tom.
Technology.
Yeah, technology. What can you do? I know. It's as emotional in many ways and as soul bearing as Plastic Ono Band in a way, because of course it does chronicle parts of the Lost Weekend, and you can definitely hear the what he was going through. I mean, the songs are just so painfully honest, like Going Down on Love. I mean, it's he was in a way talking about that, even though his life at the time in LA looked like he was having a great time and all, but he kind of needed to in a way be rescued, as he was saying about from this kind of hedonistic lifestyle he was living in many ways. What You Got was kind of a similar way, but I love his vocals on What You Got. I mean, just again showing he's one of the best, had one of the best rock and roll voices of all time. We've talked about Bless You quite a bit on this show. I think it's one of his best ballads. Show how much range he had with his voice, emotional range. Scared. I mean, that's about as raw as it gets. I know Ken and I have bonded over this song before. I mean, just an incredible song. And Steel and Glass too. I mean, that is,
don't get me started how much I love it.
exactly. Yeah, Joe and I have bonded over this song. I mean, talk about autobiographical. I mean, you just hear the pain that he's going through, and the string arrangement on that is, I mean, it's almost sounds like a horror film in many ways. I mean, you just sense the again, just this emotional torment he's going through, and nobody loves you when you're down and out. I mean, the title alone will, of course, clue you in on what's going on. I mean, he is just laying bare his life for you right there. But of course, it's not all, depressing and all. He has the song for May Ping as Surprise, Surprise, Sweet Bird Paradox, where he's, giving her credit for saving him, during this time he was going through, that if he had just gone to LA alone, I mean, would have completely self-destructed, and she certainly saved him from that. And so it's really, and then of course the cover, of Ya with Julian featured on it. So it's not, completely, but it's just, to me, an incredible example of his, bare your soul kind of songwriting, and his vocals are just as good as they've ever been. And so I cannot wait, Sean, if you're listening, for the for the box set treatment for this. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I love that album, Walls and Bridges, as well. And somebody in the comments was saying, well, I actually think it's pretty well regarded, this album, but I think I know what you're saying is that it doesn't usually get held up like the way Imagine and Plastic Ono Band do, really.
Right.
Exactly. But I really love the album. Yeah, and I can't say much more than that. Okay, so let's move on now to Tom for John Lennon.
All right. Well, even though I was born in 73, I would have loved to have been a teenager in 73. Following John's career, it was very interesting. Little success. I mean, at first he was probably the least successful of the four, which is, when you think about it, is kind of shocking in a way. And I'm not saying that his stuff was bad. I'm just saying he just wasn't having the chart success as the other three were having at the time. But I think I would like to know if fans gave up on him after some time in New York City. Imagine did okay. The Plastic Ono Band album did okay, but they weren't, what they were expecting. I don't think, if they wanted that, that the commercial feel. And I feel the next album, Mind Games, I think had a return to form in a way of commercial feel. Now, Ken, you let me know if you agree about some of that, but I think Mind Games is the one album that's starting to get more appreciation these days. But I still hear people talk about, the album Kit just talked about. I still, hear people talking more about Imagine and Plastic Ono Band, and rightfully so. Those are fantastic records. I think Mind Games sometimes gets a little bit more lost in the shuffle. I mean, what he and Yoko were going through at the time. I mean, the cover is very telling. I mean, you can, imagine what you will about that cover, with John walking away, or however you want to interpret it. But the tracks on here are just, fantastic. I mean, Mind Games, only going to 18, as a single. The album itself only going to number 9, which, number 9. So I would have loved to have been following his career up there and to see what people were, how they were talking about John back then, and if they felt that this was kind of a return to form in the commercial sense, not necessarily in a songwriting sense, because those albums, like I said, Plastic Ono Band and Imagine had some of his best songs on there. But again, this is one that I don't necessarily hear a lot of people talking about as much, but Out of the Blue, I know has become one of my all-time favorites the last 10 years. Osama Masin. I can't always. I try to say that
I
word
see.
too
I
fast.
see what I'm saying.
I try to say that word too fast, and it never comes off. And then
it's hard.
the Utopian International Anthem. I mean, come on, that's one of the best things he's ever done. You know,
That's
so,
a banger.
Yeah.
A
oh,
banger.
absolutely. But Tight As is a great rocker. You
Yeah.
can't deny that. You know, again, and I think he's in great vocal form on this album, and this is an album that makes me happy. And again, this is the one I just don't see a lot of people talking about in
I think it's
casual
getting
form.
better though. I feel, I
Yeah.
come across a lot more people saying they like it these days,
Right.
but which is a good thing. But one thing I did want to say before Ken, when you were saying about the reason why you thought maybe with John's case why he was being like ignored or forgotten in the music, if at some time in New York City and that I think that was happening a lot of his career period because of him being with Yoko and the general vibe that a lot of the general public got about the two of them being kind of
Right.
like out there and stuff like that, So you don't
Well,
agree, Kit?
Oh no, I was saying that's ridiculous.
That
was shaking
well,
my head like
I didn't know. I didn't know if you
like,
agreed.
oh no, I meant like,
It's like
how
I think because
ridiculous.
I really think that's why that Lennon guy, that he's nuts, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I really think that
Mhm.
that kind of got in the way of a lot of his acceptance and
right.
kept
And I don't
kept from
think
having more hits, number ones.
yeah.
I mean, number one.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with singing what you believe in, what they were doing with, sometime in New York City, but you also alienate, a whole side of fan base that way. And
No,
I think
yeah, but we've talked about that. Could be a show in itself. It was because I'm looking for
Yeah.
topics for Fab Gab as well, my show, and I'm thinking like the thing is, there's some people who believe. I remember Lindsey Buckingham saying that when that album Tusk came out, Fleetwood Mac. Some people didn't like it after
Yeah.
Rumors, and I remember him saying at the time, and I thought he was so like no offense, a jerk at the time. I thought for saying it. I don't think so now. When he was saying, well, if it means that artistic integrity, he says, and if it means that you come up with something that a lot of people are going to be confused by, and they're not going to accept, well, that's too bad. Stuff
Right.
like that. And I'm thinking, there's two ways of looking at it. You're gonna just kowtow. This is John versus Paul moment. It's like, Paul's like, well, this isn't working. The critics aren't really embracing this. I listened to a show recently. I don't know whose it was, where this subject came up, and it was like it took him a while to make the critics happy. Op-ed on the run. I got it. I found it. The formula, but he was trying with wildlife. He's trying to do what you want to do, but even John was. Let's face it, too. Though John wanted a hit too.
Oh sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
or else he would have kept doing more Sometime in New York Cities if
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So, but at the time, that's what he wanted to do. Um, yeah. Tom, did I step over you? You were finished, or?
No, yeah, all set.
All right. Thanks. Now we're gonna go to Ken for John Lennon.
Okay, well, before I give you my choice, first of all, I just wanted to say about Kit's choice with Walls and Bridges. Walls and Bridges is very much like Plastic Ono Band, only really produced well with a full band.
Right.
Not as raw, but man, so it's produced extremely well. And I rave about Scared and Stealing Glass and how well and Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out, but I agree with what you guys are saying. It still is Plastic Ono Band, Imagine, Double Fantasy for the most part as being rated the best, but I do feel like Mind Games and Walls and Bridges are getting a bit more respect, but just not in the same regard as the others.
Right. Exactly.
So, and John, yeah, it's true. I think John pissed off a lot of people by trying to force Yoko on the public. But if you look at his chart success, he still did very well up until, say, Sometime in New York City. And he had hits like Instant Karma and Imagine. Plastic Ono Band album still went top 10. The Imagine album went to number 1. So it's not like he wasn't doing that well.
No.
I guess I was thinking number one singles.
Yeah, well, he didn't have a number 1 single until Whatever Gets You Through the Night.
Yeah.
But
or didn't Fame come first?
What's that?
Didn't Fame come first though?
I don't look at that as a John Lennon single.
Bowie.
It's a David Bowie single, but even still, no. Whatever gets you through the night was a hit before Fame.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 74.
Yep. November of 74. It hit
And the other one's 75, right?
yeah.
I'm
Well,
trying to get my years right. I don't know.
Yeah, but my choice is definitely Mind Games. I think that Mind Games is the most overlooked of John Lennon's solo career. It's a solid album from start to finish. It is, I do like the songs on Sometime in New York City, but you also have to regard an album that's half John, half Yoko as different from an all John Lennon album. And I love John's stuff on Sometime in New York City too, despite the fact that they're songs about people of that time. I still love them, but I like all the songs on Mind Games. There's so much. I definitely rate songs like Out the Blue and I Know as among the best of John's solo career, of his all-time career, including Beatles stuff. I think the title track to Mind Games is one of his greatest songs and greatest singles. There's so much amazing material on there. You Are Here is a beautiful song. Meat City. I just wish Meat City would go on a couple more minutes because it's a fantastic rocker.
Yeah.
I love Bring On the Lucy a lot. I actually like One Day at a Time, but I got to tell you, even though I know John said that it was Yoko's idea that he sing the song in falsetto, I like the version better that's on the John Lennon anthology where he's singing it in regular voice. I think it works better for him that way, just my opinion. I See Sen, terrific track. Such a great bluesy number that works really well for him. David Spinoza aces on that guitar solo. Intuition is a fantastic song. I always thought that could work as a single.
Well, that was going to be my question to you, Ken. I mean, because there's only one single on this album. I mean, what do you see here as a follow-up single?
As a very commercial song, I think probably Intuition, but I don't think it would have charted that high, maybe top 20. Hey, if Mind Games couldn't make the top 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Mind Games is a fantastic record, and it's really marvelously produced. I know people rave a lot about It's the Carman, Imagine, and Mind Games is so amazing as a song.
Yeah. I agree.
And later on, to me, Woman is still my favorite song of John Lennon's solo career. So as a single, I have to rate that number one, but Mind Games is way up the list. So, as far as a really solid album that most people don't give that much credit to, definitely, if you love Imagine, how can you, as an album, the Imagine album, how can you not like Mind Games? It's impossible. They're really loaded with strong material. And like you said, Tom, Tight As is a great rocker.
Yeah.
I just like every song on there. Only People is the only one that's kind of like a forced, very, very commercial song, but I still like it. The whole, but just for Out the Blue and I Know in Mind Games, it's worth it for that.
Do you actually know people in fandom who don't like the album? I mean, I ask because I know the people who might not think of it as up there as Plastic Ono Band, Imagine, and maybe even Walls and Bridges. I put it number 4 actually, but I don't know I never heard anybody that didn't like it. They just might put it a little lower. What do you think?
When I interviewed Jack Douglas, he wasn't too impressed with it.
Oh, really? Oh, well.
It's kind of like to him, John going through the motions.
Oh, yeah.
We felt that's his ears. He has a right to say it. I know some people have complained about the production on Mind Games, and it's a very muddy sounding album.
The original.
I always liked the production on Mind Games. I like the remaster that came out in 2010. I like the remaster too, but I think I like the original.
Well, does anybody want to take a guess at what my underrated John Lennon album is? Okay.
You're gonna be the same as Kid. Are you gonna match Kid again?
we could be here forever, so I'll just say it. Sometime in New York City, but this is a good time. This is a good time to say with this album. a good example. Underrated doesn't mean. I mean, I might have said it before. I can't even remember with my short-term memory loss these days. Uh, you know, about it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's. Oh, this is great. This is fantastic. Yeah, I said that with some other album. I can't remember which one. There's Somewhere in England by George. I said it. You know, if I'm gonna personally rank my feelings on John's studio albums, this one will come up at the bottom, as far as his original material. Maybe Milk and Honey, but I never really count Milk and Honey because it wasn't fully realized while John was alive. So, so yeah, I get that, and I'm not calling this any kind of masterpiece. We've talked about this album as well. I think it shows, and some people think it's a lot of foolishness on John's part. I say it's bravery, guts, putting something like this out. And Ken was saying one of the criticisms is he kind of said, "Yeah, it's about people and events from the past." I think that was the idea of it. What's going on in the news today.
Mhm.
But that gets us into our favorite dated thing that doesn't matter. If it's dated or so to speak, you just got to make enjoy it for that. And I think then here, I think the Elephant's Memory band sounds. I like them on this. They sound grungy. They sound good to me on
Mm.
this album. I
I
don't.
agree.
Yeah,
I
I
agree with
like the
that.
sound of them, and I've heard at least one of their albums, Elephant's Memory, that I like as far as that goes. Um, Not as much so with respect, I say, live on the one-to-one show, but I
Mhm.
really like the sound on this. And the Yoko stuff, I like the Yoko stuff on here. Sisters Oh Sisters, I always call it like it reminds me of a girl group kind of
Mm.
song. And We're All Water is just Yoko, another tour de force of her
Yeah.
being Yoko, but in a fun way, I think. And I like Born in a Prison. I like the way John sings with her on that. Uh, some of the lyrics are nice. I like the way they sing "Luck of the Irish" together. But for John, I love the track, controversial track. Woman is the end of the world.
Mhm.
I mean, I just think that again, that's coming out there and saying something with a song like that for women's rights. Really, is what it's about. Saying how women are mistreated and not treated properly. That's controversial. I like the nerve behind that. I like the sound of the track. I like the way John sings it. With the force and the power of it. And everything. I mean, Attica State, don't agree with the subject matter of it, but I like the roughness of the sound of it, of it. And the song New York City, as I always say, is my favorite song maybe on the record. It's just a good rocker. John didn't do many of those rockers we talked about. Meat City, What You Got,
Oh,
and so forth. And it's great to hear him do something like New York City. And for me, being from New York, I love to hear him like singing a claim for the city and everything. So yeah, I just like the album, but definitely in my book, not his best album at all. But I just think it's more listenable than most people give it credit for. If you're a John Lennon fan, that's kind of what I mean by underrated for me.
Mhm.
You know. So
I like what you said about Elephant's Memory because that band really suited this material.
yeah, I think so.
I
Song,
agree.
perfect band for those songs.
For
Yeah,
for that for that purpose, for that album, I think it really worked. I mean, they had that, as you said, that grungy sound that, they didn't need to be slick for those songs. I
Mhm.
mean, they sounded good. I mean, I thought they really, and I'm not saying this facetiously at all. I mean, I like We're All Water, and I thought they jammed on that. I mean, I really liked their sound
hmm.
on that
yeah.
song. Mhm.
And she makes good observations. We can get a whole show of Yoko's lyrics and so forth. I mean,
Mhm.
Oh,
you know,
Yeah, I
John
like the
once said,
lyrics of that song
I like the
actually.
lyrics. I like most of her lyrics most of the time. I think
Hmm.
they make you think. And
Hmm.
John once said, I mean, Yoko's lyrics are so poetic. He's admires them, and they are a lot of
Hmm.
times.
I can't wait to talk about some of her lyrics here soon.
Yes, we are. Yep.
Yes, there's going to be shows where
Sneak
we're going to
preview.
be doing that stuff. All right. So let's get to Mr. McCartney. Paul McCartney saved the biggest catalog for last. I'm going to start with Ken for this one. So Ken, you're up first for Paul McCartney for an underrated album.
Well, I don't think anyone who's followed my work is going to be shocked to hear me say what I would pick, but it always comes down to two albums. It's either Press to Play or Driving Rain. And I'm glad to see that I think that both those albums have risen a bit, I think, in recent years.
I've seen that, yes.
I've noticed that, but I'm going to pick Press to Play most of all because I just think that the collaborations that he did on that album with Eric Stewart, I think worked really well. That's a very underrated songwriting partnership that I wish continued. And I love the work that Hugh Padgham did on it. And I realize that it's an ongoing debate on most podcast shows. There are people that would prefer if Paul would just, continue to do the kind of music where it's more his own sound, the sound that made him famous, not just in the Beatle days, but that 70s sound, instead of jumping around to different producers, whatever the flavor of the month is at the time. And a lot of people look at Press to Play as being very 80s. There are some songs in there that definitely have an 80s sound, but there's music that's out there today that has an 80s sound if you really were to listen to some of the bands that are out today. I don't mind when Paul does that. It keeps his music fresh for me. I don't want him putting out the same sound every time. I don't want, there are people who fall in the Flaming Pie, Chaos and Creation camp, and I love those albums, don't get me wrong. But if every album was like Flaming Pie, if every album was like the Wings sound of the 70s, eventually it would get monotonous. So I like the fact that he tries working with different producers. I think it keeps his catalog interesting. And I love the material on Press to Play so much. I think Stranglehold is a great opening track. I love the medley of Good Times Come and Feel the Sun. There's so many ideas in there. And I love all the drum sounds, the heavy drum sounds and the synthesizers and stuff like that are on a song like that. It really works for that material. And I have heard the bootleg of what it was like when it was before Padgham and more what Eric Stewart would have wanted. I like that too, but I'm so used to the way it is on Press to Play. I kind of prefer it that way. Talk More Talk, I have to love that song, don't I?
It's our theme song.
Yes. I like all that electronic stuff, just like Paul kind of repeated that with She's Given Up Talking on Driving Rain. I see similarities between both those albums, Press to Play and Driving Rain. Footprints is a gorgeous tune, one of his great acoustic tunes, written with Eric Stewart. You don't get much better as a ballad than Only Love Remains. I mean, it's just a completely perfect song that should be recognized as, if not the best ballad of his solo career, definitely in the top 3 to 5, and there's a lot of people that don't even know that song and should know it. It's just simply a gorgeous tune. I've always loved Press as a song. Did you want to say something, Tom?
I guess this has been confirmed. It's Louise Harrison has passed away.
Oh.
You checked on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But sorry to interrupt, Ken.
Yeah, wow. That's really sad news to hear. I mean, she's been a friend of the Fest for Beatle fans, been a guest several times. And, we all know that she moved to the United States early.
Right.
She was plugging the Beatles, trying to help them out early on before they were really big. And, it's kind of questionable, the relationship that George had with Louise. But I know that certainly for those of us who have been to the Fest, many of them have enjoyed her company there, and just very sad to hear.
Yeah, very sorry to hear that.
I actually got a message while the show was on about that, but I wanted to check before I said anything. So
I was checking.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's been confirmed. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So about Press to Play. I always love Press as a single. Again, there's a song that doesn't sound like anything else he did before that. Although Spies Like Us is kind of leads to that in a way with the head a little bit. But Press is a very different song for him. Pretty Little Head. I love the weird.
Yeah.
So weird from Paul. For people that you Joe, you love Check My Machine. Come on.
I'm gonna get you back when I talk about my choice of McCartney underrated. Don't worry.
I was wondering where you were going with that, Ken. We're like, you, Joe. Like,
Well, I'm
wait,
sorry.
weird?
This, I was going to be quiet all through the Press to Play. This is Ken's moment.
No, I heard you say that you love Check My Machine as a song, but
Yeah,
there's
as an oddball B-side, yes, I do. But not. I think most of the songs on Press to Play are weak. It has nothing for me to do with production.
okay. That's what you've said, but a lot of people.
I know, as we always say.
Okay, I'm only going by what a lot of fans have said to me.
Correct.
I notice a pattern. A lot of Beatle fans don't like more modern sounds. They want more of the same, of what made the Beatles famous in the first place. There are people that now don't want the Jeff Lynne sound, that object to that. We've noticed that on this show.
Yeah.
Comments from people.
Yep.
But anyway, where was I? Move Over Busker, I love a lot as a rocker. Angry, I like a lot as a rocker, although we've said it several times. You got Pete Townsend and Phil Collins on there. You could do something better than Angry, but I still love the song anyway. It's like what we said about the Rockestra theme. However Absurd is extremely Beatle-y, but very produced, but I still love it. A lot of orchestration on it, weird lyrics on there, kind of, walrusy in a way. And I love all the bonus stuff that's on Press to Play. Tough on a Tightrope is such a fantastic song in particular. And even from that period, Hang Glide as a B-side is an amazing instrumental, very new age-ish. So, it shows to me a growth in Paul working with Hugh Padgham and coming up with all these different sounds and songs that we really hadn't heard before or that were different. And I like when Paul goes in that direction. And at the same time, he still does the traditional. He still does Only Love Remains and Footprints and Move Over Busker, So I really like it. I still to this day find Press to Play totally refreshing to listen to, and I could equally defend Driving Rain, but, I love Press to Play more.
Oh, okay. Kit, you're up next.
Okay, well, Press to Play, it was definitely tempting to pick, but again, I've talked about it a lot, and so I decided to go with a different one, and that is, in my opinion, the also criminally overlooked Memory Almost Full. Now, I know Dance Tonight, Paul will still play that occasionally on tour, but other than that, people tend to say, Chaos and Creation was, sometimes they'll say either the last great album he made, or they'll skip over and say, and then New, or something like that. And it's like Memory Almost Full has been kind of forgotten. And that is really unfair because I love Memory Almost Full. I think it is such a deeply personal album, almost as much as Chaos and Creation was. In fact, a number of Chaos and Creation, some of the songs on here that were meant for Chaos and Creation were ended up on Memory Almost Full. I just think it was well produced, same producer as Driving Rain, in fact. And, it also it really seems, the title is pretty apt because it really sees Paul, this album, in a reflective mood, really kind of reflecting, on his past, on his mortality. He, of course, this was issued, it was, he and Heather had split up. And so you hear some songs that may or may not be related to the split. He's never exactly been clear about it, but it's, you can kind of read into it. But I just really love his vulnerability on this record, and you don't see that very often from him. I think Ever Present Past is, and that was, of course, one of the singles from the album. I think that's a great, it's an up-tempo song, but when you listen to the lyrics, it's also him again, reflecting on his past. I think See Your Sunshine is a great love song.
Yes.
It really is. Only Mama Knows is like Wings
love it.
redo. That's a great rocker. And then he talks about it being kind of a medley of different song fragments put together. Yeah, but it also, I think, you can listen to it as separate songs as well. I mean, just some great, again, reflective kind of songs like Vintage Clothes. That Was Me, great vocal on that. I just love him saying, kind of expressing amazement, like, wow, that was me. That was me up on that stage. That was me. I love Sweating Cobwebs on the, on the clearly cavern stage. And, The End of the End, come on. I think one of the best songs he ever wrote. I mean, it still brings me to tears when I hear it. I mean, just reflecting on his own death. There's just everything on this album. And, Nod Your Head. I mean, kind of stupid throwaway lyrics, but it's fun. You do nod your head to it. A little kind of Led Zeppelin influenced in a way. I mean, even the bonus tracks were good. I thought. I like Why So Blue, even the mainly instrumental 222. I love the jazz.
Great.
I thought was really on a creative roll on this album. And again, just a very personal, look at his life. I thought his voice sounded great for the most part on this album. I thought his voice sounded strong. I have always just loved this album. And so Chaos and Creation, I still love. Absolutely. But do not neglect Memory Almost Full. You will love it just as much, I think, as Chaos.
Yeah, it's a good endorsement. I love it. Yeah.
Just make sure the volume's down when you pop it in the CD player.
Yeah, that's usually the complaint I hear is how it was mixed or the loudness of it or something. I echo everything pretty much. I love that album, and also House of Wax I like to mention because of Paul's vocal performance, New Heights or Old Heights maybe, revisited. He does so well on that. And he can always skip over Gratitude, but no.
Yeah, it's okay.
I wouldn't skip it, but it's not a favorite.
When someone continues to produce great album after great album, sometimes it's easy for an album to get lost in the shuffle, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I usually hear on my channel anyway, I come across a lot of positive remarks and comments for that album. People may forget it here and there, and it falls through the cracks, but when they do talk about it, they do like it.
It just seems like it's one of those albums, like, when Paul Simon's Graceland came along, and of course, everybody went crazy over it. It's of course now a classic. And then he came out with Rhythm of the Saints after that, and Rhythm of the Saints, in my opinion, was like just as good. It was incredible. But Graceland was such a big album that it just overshadowed it. And in a way, I feel like, not exactly, but that's kind of what happened to Memory Almost Full, because, today everybody talks about Chaos and Creation. And it's become this, one of the best albums Paul ever did in modern years. And Memory Almost Full has just become kind of overshadowed.
That's kind of how I feel about the album New getting overshadowed by Egypt Station, which I think New is far better than Egypt Station, in my opinion.
You had a good point about the overshadow, because we consider Chaos such this masterpiece, and it comes just 2 years after, and then 1 year after that we get Electric Arguments, which I think was a phenomenal album as well. So I think you have
look at all this good stuff, and I'm always inclined to say, folks, because I know they're out there. Those people that say, "Oh, McCartney, he hasn't done anything good since Band on the Run," or some
Yeah.
people say Tug of War. Some other people say Flaming Pie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff there. You're missing it.
He still is putting out great stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
The praise he got from McCartney 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I like it a lot.
But thank you for saying what you said about the end of the end, because I've been
Oh,
going on and on about that song for so long. And, I do think it's one of Paul's absolute masterpieces, one of his greatest songs of all time.
Mhm.
It's a lot of good stuff on Memory Almost Full. There's no doubt about it. That Was Me is such a killer tune.
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying, I did all that.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of like My Way.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Let's go to Tom. Tom, let's go for Paul McCartney.
Just wanted to nod your head reminds me a little bit of the goofiness of something like Smile Away.
Yeah. Kind
Yeah,
of.
I'm perfectly okay
Yeah.
with it.
Oh, sure. It's fun.
with it.
All right. All right. Well, after 5 #1 albums in a row, I don't know if anybody was expecting anything like London Town. And I don't know if anybody still expects anything like London Town when they listen to something from Paul McCartney. And in a time where we were, veering in a different direction with punk and new wave, Paul just, went the other way. And in a way with Spies Like Us, being so, 80s and then leading into Press the Play, Mulligan Tire kind of laid the tracks for what to expect for London Town in a way, especially with just the acoustic guitar aspect of it. I don't know if anybody was expecting a folksy synthy, record at the time. Yes, it goes to #2. Does well. I mean, a massive #1 hit single here in the state with a little luck. But again, it's just an album that I think people, look at it as middle of the road. And like you guys were saying, we like it when he does something different. I mean, you can't get any more different than Morris Moose and the Grey Goose, right? I mean, this is just so out of left field. And the work that he was doing with Denny Lane in here, Deliver Your Children, I still think is probably the best thing they may have done together. Maybe that's just me thinking right now. But I look at Famous Groupies. I like Don't Let It Bring You Down. So many different things going on in this. I'm Caring, Backwards Traveler, London Cafe on the Left Bank. We see he still had Joe and Jimmy, on a lot of these tracks, but man, I don't think this was anything. I don't think this was the direction people were expecting from Paul at this time, and really a shocker when you think about it. So, London Town for me is just something, as an album that I've always dug, but I don't always hear a lot of people talking about, whether or not it's just because it's so mellow, or with the synth stuff, or because maybe the rockers on here aren't as rocking as past rockers like Beware My Love or Junior's Farm, but yeah, I think people should definitely maybe consider another listen. But yeah, London Town for me is definitely I think is an underrated album from Paul. So
I think that's a good point you made about, and kind of what Ken was saying earlier about, different sound, because that album really did have a different sound to it. I mean, it did have that softer, with a lot of it, that kind of softer sound. And then as you mentioned, it was more, what was it? I'm blanking out, the Grey Goose,
oh yeah, crazy, experimental or experimenting with that, like the synth, I mean,
yeah, the synth sound was really predominant on that album. And so, there are people who, and I'm not defending this, but I mean, there are people who just, when Paul tries anything different, that has a different sound, some don't like that. And so, I think that is, and I admire artists who take chances. And I mean, like Elvis Costello does that all the time, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, that particular album doesn't sell, so what? He tried it. And so
Right.
it goes back to another sound, maybe goes back to a more familiar sound on the next album. But
Right.
there are just some people that, don't like it when the
Right.
artist tries something new.
And I think it did. I mean, it did sell, but I with punk and new wave
number
coming
one.
in, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, and then disco was massive too. I mean,
Right.
Saturday Night Fever, I think, kept this off the charts. I mean, it still sold, but I think it did as well as it did just because of the McCartney factor.
Right.
In my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, I'm finding it hard that as I'm listening to you talking about it. I mean, I always think of London Town, and I still do, as a mid-tier album. I don't think of it as one of his top or bottom. It's a mid.
Right.
It's in the middle somewhere. I love a lot of tracks on it, but to me,
Yeah.
it's a half and half album, kind
Mhm.
of. But I see it as I listen to you talk about it. I'm thinking of it, at least in my feeling, that it's kind of not anything really different or different McCartney or trying different stuff. To me, if anything, it's maybe you said, I think it's a little too mellow. I love mellow Paul, but
Oh
to me
yeah.
it's a
Oh
little
yeah.
too safe like
Mm,
that, maybe. I don't
I
see
don't know.
anything different.
I guess what for me, when I first heard it, what was different for me was the prevalence of the synth. Like that,
Mm.
I don't know, that sounded different to me, like that much synth on the album. Maybe that's,
Mm.
for me, that's what was different. But
Mm.
you know,
Well,
but interesting. Yeah.
I thought maybe after hearing it, it was time to get back to the egg. Maybe is what I picked Back to the Egg. Now the thing is, I have a hard time because I could think of three albums, more than three albums, that are really underrated by Paul. And I never know which one to pick. I've talked about these. I was almost going to pick McCartney too. I got to just say, when Ken was talking about, hey Joe, you like Check My Machine, right? And that's outrageous, right? Now I know that, Ken. I know you've told me before. If you had, I think, if I'm right, if you had to put them in order, you might put McCartney two low and near the bottom for you. You used to say,
Yeah,
right?
because I think a lot of the songs aren't strong.
Yeah. That's
Um,
how I feel about Press to
yeah,
Play.
no, that's
Not the weirdness facts. We agree on only opposite, like same principle for us, I think.
yeah. I mean,
Only,
I like weird. I love bogey music.
Yeah.
yeah.
I love Temporary Secretary. I love all that. I just think certain songs he didn't put as much effort into writing,
Mm.
Room or something like that.
Yeah, but see, but that's again, you know what? I was going to go back to the egg. Why don't I defend McCartney too instead? I don't know. Uh, because both of these, and off the ground also, I've defended off the ground so many times that I'm off the ground, I'm flying with that. So those are the three. I got my three, and off the ground, McCartney too, and back to the egg. But the thing about McCartney too is, it's like people who defend something, like myself, will always say, well, it's supposed to be like that. Like if says it's something silly or sad, they say, well, that was supposed to be like that.
Mhm.
That's why they don't like it. That's why I do like it. This wasn't even supposed to be an album. Paul always said, he just kind of was knocking around, making a tape, stuff for him to hear. And I believe that story where he was driving around and people heard it maybe in this car he was with in the car. That's your next album. You should, he goes, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so. And he put it out as an album. I guess so that's how I defend that. But which one? I can't pick two. I started with this, Back to the Egg. So what do I do? Well, you got my defense of McCartney, to why I like it. So different. All the things we're saying, so different. Something they've never done before. Different
Right.
sounds. Nothing you're used to hearing. That's why I like it. And also the fact that it reminds me dearly of high school graduation, and in the summer of '80. So I have that warm feeling every time I hear those songs. But anyway, I got two out of this, folks. But back to the egg. It's hard to pick one.
Sneaky, sneaky.
Uh-huh.
Back to the egg, just again, it'll be quick because we've talked about it. It's getting late here. Uh, it's just, Paul's rocking again, he's stronger again. People say a punk feel to some of the songs, like Spin It On, not everything. I mean, what can I just like it. I love everything. And you got the Last Wings album and a great lineup. I love Steve Holley on drums, Lawrence Juber on guitar.
Mhm.
Um, I love a lot of all the incarnations of Wings. It's hard to pick a favorite, honestly, for me. But I like this and where they were going, the direction they were going. Too bad it wasn't more successful by Wings standards. By anybody else's standards, yeah, it's respectable, but not by theirs. And I could say a lot more about it, but we're running short of time. I just a lot of people starting to catch on to this. Like a lot of these
Yeah.
albums, people are starting to say, "Hey, I like Mind
Right.
Games. I'm starting to like," and
Well, that's why we're
good for them.
hoping that we get London Town and Back to the Egg, these
Yeah,
archive releases, so people can reevaluate them. And just like the past records, like Wildlife and Red Rose Speedway, people have been, reevaluating them favorably. So let's go.
Let's
hmm
do this.
yeah, yeah. Somebody says Ollie Perry says summer of '79, McCartney too. Nope, that's what he made it. I mean, but it's maybe
Yeah.
right.
It came out in
But
'80, right?
it came
Yeah.
out in '80. Trust me.
Hmm. Yep.
But yeah. So that's it. Any last thoughts as we hit the 2 hour mark here?
Yeah, just what Tom was saying about London Town. When I think about that album, I think it's a very mellow album for the most part.
Mhm.
There are those albums from Paul where you kind of wish he put a few more rockers in there. And even something like I've Had Enough needs another guitar in there
Yeah. Right.
to make it sound full. It sounds kind of thin, you know.
Mhm.
Could be a very ballsy song if you had another, guitar player in there. I
I
love
agree.
Cafe on the Left Bank a lot as a
Me
rock.
too.
Yeah.
I wish, there were a few more rockers on it. And
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. I love London Town. I love With a Little Luck, Cafe on the Left Bank.
Yeah.
I always defend. I guess I've had enough. I know it's not the greatest rocker he ever did, but I like it. Maybe because on that album it needs it at the end.
Mhm.
At the end of
uh,
side one.
Mm.
Don't Let It Bring You Down is one of my favorite of his acoustic tunes. It is
Mm.
a very acoustic album. It's not just
Right.
thinking about synthesizers and all, but and I like that. It's kind of like, a rubber soul approach
Mm.
to or maybe I should say American rubber soul approach to a Wings album. But yeah, and it's interesting that he went in a somewhat different direction with Back to the Egg, which was edgier. Oh,
Mm.
those ballads a lot side too. But yeah, there's just so much great stuff to discover. That's why we're doing this. There's so many
Yeah.
great McCartney
Absolutely.
albums. It isn't funny.
Mhm.
Well, we hope that's one of the things with this
Yeah.
show we'd like to try to do. If you're not familiar with the stuff, we can try to turn you on to some of it, give you the desire to seek some of it out that you might not have heard.
Mm.
And not a
Mm.
lot of overlap with our choices. There
No,
was only
Very
like a
good.
couple.
no, it went
So
well. It
that
went
was
well.
cool.
As far as showing you, that shows you right there how much different stuff is there that
You
would to
got it.
like and
Yeah.
so forth. Well, why don't we wrap it up now, Kit? And you can tell everybody how to find us, reach us.
All absolutely, and thank all of you. I see we've been looking at your comments. You've also thrown in your thoughts on your favorite solo albums. Once again, shows just how much great material there is to
Yes.
discover out there. So thank you all for your comments as well. You can find us, of course, on our website, talkmoretalk.com. You can email us at talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, and if you have ideas for topics you would like us to explore.
Yes.
We welcome your feedback. You can follow us on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1. You can listen to us on virtually any podcasting platform you can think of. You can, of course, watch us right on this channel, and please subscribe. We're hoping to get up to 2,000 subscribers soon, so please help us reach that goal, and tell your friends, tell all your Beatles and solo friends, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And you can, of course, find us on Facebook, where we post news and stuff we're doing and so forth. So please subscribe there, and you'll be notified of all our new episodes. And you can hear us on Fab4 Radio. So thanks, of course, to Beatle Ed for running our shows. So
Thank you.
yes, indeed. So I think that's everywhere you can find us.
So we got that. Now we just have to say what we're up to. And me, just watch my channel on YouTube, Mean Mr. Mayo. It's Beatles centric. It's solo Beatles centric. It's got red videos for everyday irritants. It's got record store visits. It's got flea market thrift store shopping. It's got show and tell of different memorabilia. Oh, it's got a lot of other stuff. I'm taking as long as these three. Okay, just check it out. Okay, so Kit,
Oh, well, what about your
what
movie channel? What about your movie
no,
channel?
no, come on. We got enough problems. We'll talk about that another time. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
All right. Well, for me, I do have another Roots of Rock and Roll class coming up, but it's not till April, so I will tell you more about it closer to that time. But do have a new episode up of the podcast I co-host with Martin Quibble and at Chen, Toppermost of the Poppermost, where we look at January 1963. You can follow us on Facebook, just put Toppermost of the Poppermost, but I will put the link up to the new episode on the Talk More Talk page and my Facebook page. So hope you will check us out and let us know what you think of the new episode. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Cool.
All right. I guess Tom we do because Ken's always we save the best for last, and he's got the most usually.
He usually does. No joke. For Two Legs, I'll try to go as quick as possible. 2 weeks ago, we did our review of the McCartney Legacy book. Then we did a show where we got an email for a suggestion of a show that Ken, that you and guys at the things we said today we did about last May actually, because I looked it up, but it was called The Album Game, and then where you take a decade of music and then you take one song that would fit the next album and then take one song from that album and then see if it would fit the previous album, and then you just can continue to go and go and go, and that was a lot of fun, and that was from Kyle Hand, so thank you for that suggestion. And then this past Saturday we did our favorite, we don't always talk Beatles, but sometimes we do, and this time around we did our 10 pre-Pepper Paul songs. These are the 10 our favorite Paul led vocals, or if he co-wrote or wrote too as well, that we thought were his or not really, I shouldn't say his best, but what we think was in our top 10 at the moment. So pre-Pepper. Coming up next week, we had the lovely Kid O'Toole talking about the missing 80s single. It's probably roughly, this would have came out back in February of '84, just to give you guys a hint of the time period of what we're talking about. And that was a lot of fun. And then last thing here, I started a new thing which is going to premiere this Wednesday, and features Andy and myself, and then Joe Mayo and our friend Beadley Tone. And this show is called Stuck Inside These Four Walls, and it's 4 hosts doing 4 rounds of supposed rapid fire questions. It didn't go as rapid as we were hoping, but it got quicker as we were going. So check that out. If you guys like it, let us know in the comments, and we'll continue doing that. But it was just something fun, and to see if it catches fire, and then see if it's got legs, and then hopefully we'll continue to do that as a monthly series. Yes. So, all right. Email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Two Legs Podcast. Ken, off to you.
Okay. Don't know if I can compete with all that, but
oh, please.
my YouTube channel, I had 2 very interesting panel discussions in the past week. One of which I had a group of people, Glenn Burtnick from the Weaklings, Darren DeVivo from my podcast show, Things We Said Today, and Edward Crawford, who is the host of Call Me Mr. Broadstreet, another Beatles podcast. And I had each of them pick their top 5 lesser known solo McCartney songs that are original songs written or co-written by Paul that they feel deserve classic status. So songs you can't say something like Band on the Run or something really familiar.
Obvious, yeah.
It has to be like an album cut or a B-side, something obscure, or even a single that didn't do well. Something that you feel in your heart really should be so well known, just like Band on the Run or Maybe I'm Amazed or Live and Let Die. Songs that you feel are top tier McCartney songs. that are lesser well known, and each of them gave 5. I also continue with my Young Blood series, and that's when I interview 3 people that are 40 and under to get their opinions, the perspectives of the younger generation. And I asked them 3 questions, one of which was, what was the most fascinating year when the Beatles were together? Also, which of the 4 solo Beatles solo careers do you find the most satisfying, and why? And then finally, what do you think is the best song that Paul has written in this century, from 2000 to today? That's a show to itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ken, I'm not going to reveal it, but you and I had the same song.
Mhm.
Well, I'll yeah.
Maybe we
And
should tack that here.
in the 5 McCartney songs that you feel deserve to be classics, it's amazing. Three of the 4 of us, because I give my own. 3 of the 4 of us have the same song in there.
Wow.
And also, I recently interviewed Don Daneman, who was a member of the Circle, and they toured the U.S. with the Beatles. In 1966, they have their first new album, studio album, in 56 years, Center of the World, which you can win on my website. And it's all about the history of the Circle. They had the hits Red Rubber Ball, Turn Down Day. John Lennon gave them their name, Circle, with a Y, the weird spelling of Circle. And Brian Epstein was the manager for the Circle. So it's all about that, and all about the brand new album, Center of Our World. I also have the other podcast show, Things We Said Today. We just did an interview with Gary Burr, who you know from his years with the Roundheads, with Ringo, and host Mark Hudson, and talking about his career. And we'll be doing a tribute to Yoko. That should be either the next show or the one after that, coming soon. My radio show, Every Little Thing, in syndication on about 50 stations. You can always listen to on demand at WFDU's website, which is WFDU.FM. Just go to the archive tab and type in, you don't even have to type in, you do a drop-down menu and you find Every Little Thing, and it'll have the last 2 shows. And each show is on their website for 2 weeks. So anytime you want to, you could listen to that show. And then there's my website, kenmichaelsradio.com, weekly Beatles trivia, where you can win everything from the McCartney legacy to Chris Englehart's new book, Beatles Fully Uncovered, the Circle's new CD, whole bunch of great stuff. Ringo Starr and his all-star band live at the Greek Theater 2019. And again, that's at kenmichaelsradio.com. If you can, please subscribe to Ken Michaels Radio, the YouTube channel, Things We Said Today. Listen to Every Little Thing, and go back and watch every Talk More Talk show that you haven't seen yet.
There you go.
Something.
It's all here.
And also watch my movie channel. Let's
Yes.
There you go.
No, I'll get into this next time. But anyway, all right, that's it, folks. So for Kid O'Toole, Ken Michaels, and Tom Hunyadi, this is Joe Mayo saying, have a great day and a beautiful night.
Hey.
Yay.